Yeah, off we go. And please, by the way, if you've got any questions, store them up and use the little chat box at the bottom, and then we'll come to questions at the end of the session. So the session will probably be about, I guess, 40 minutes, Tim?
Yes,
I'll
race through at a pace. 45 minutes is probably...
That's fine. As long as we leave 10 minutes at the end for questions.
Let me just close down all the pictures of everybody else, then I won't be distracted.
And can you go to full screen?
There you go.
Perfect. Right, I'll shut up.
Thank you, Stephen. Morning, everybody. I've done plenty of these sessions over the last couple of months. The title started off with coping in lockdown, then it morphed into coping after lockdown, and then it's been about building resilience. So it doesn't really matter what the title is, the effect is the same. In the time available, I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of the subconscious and how we can affect change in our behaviour and in our mood in a positive way. And as Stephen said, there'll be some practical stuff at the end for you to be able to have and experience for yourself. I've got a picture of Stephen on my screen and I really don't want that there. How do I get that to me? Never mind, I can't. Doesn't matter. Let's dive straight in. The intro was nice, thank you. Yes, I've worked in all kinds of different areas, helping people with their performance. The difference bit, and we deliberately left it off the intro paragraph that you will have received, is that 18 years ago, I retrained as a hypnotist or a hypnotherapist anyway. But the idea is that through a process, which I will explain to you without the fear or risk of you having to do any daft stuff, we have a way of impacting our behaviour through a very quick, non-sort of invasive process, nice and relaxing, but it's also a tangible, measurable performance improvement, which a lot of coaches can't really quantify in the way that I can. So let's give you a quick take on my view of what hypnosis is. And this is not a dictionary definition, this is my definition. I seek to help people influence their behaviour or their performance, whatever it is, by challenging unwanted or negative limiting beliefs. That's easy enough to understand. The hard bit is at an unconscious level. So at the moment, 2 minutes into a presentation, you're still all 100% conscious, I suspect. If I really adopted a boring voice and droned on a bit, you'll start to go into daydream, which is when the unconscious starts to open. Now, that's kind of an important part of the process, but I'm going to give you all this theory at a conscious level in a kind of pacey, upbeat way, and explain to you how you can receive some benefit to your unconscious later in the comfort of your own homes, listening to a piece of pre-recorded audio. But hypnosis is not devil worship. It's just a very quick, different way of influencing behavior. And let's face it, the whole advertising industry is predicated on influencing us unconsciously. Oh, I'd like to buy that new car. Why? I already have a car. But you see something often enough in nice visual imagery, you end up thinking you'd look good in that car. So hypnosis has been around for donkey's years. Let's touch on some basic psychology. All of us have two distinct hemispheres of the brain doing two very different things. They are complementary to each other. The left side of the brain is the conscious bit, that bit you're using right now. And you're using these facilities, these faculties of logic and reason and fact, science, knowledge, all the things you've learnt from education to apply. If I tried to hoodwink you with nonsense, you're all smart enough to know that you would just zone out at that point. You just go, that's not true. So we use our conscious brain to verify fact. The right brain, much more interesting. Most of us know very little about the right brain. I knew nothing about it until I got fascinated by the process. The unconscious is the bit where we store the memories and of all of our experiences from the day we were born and the meanings we've attached to them. From that, we create beliefs about ourselves, and from those beliefs, we create automatic responses to save ourselves crucial bandwidth, crucial conscious bandwidth so that most of the things that we do on a daily basis are habitual. We don't think about them, we just do them. So that's what the unconscious is there for. To put it a little bit more crudely or simplistically, the conscious brain is the head, the unconscious brain is the heart, and you use the head and the heart to formulate your behaviors or the way you see the world. If you look at the bottom there, the other yellow bit, the head is the thinking brain, the unconscious, the heart is the doing brain. If those two bits of your brain are nicely aligned, then you'll be in your zone. If for any reason those two bits are not aligned, then you're in your conflict zone, which is where your performance is compromised, and it doesn't take a genius to align those two bits of your brain so that your reality or your behaviors are improved. Let's assume that we all share this, lockdown is dreadful. Oh my God, can't wait to get off these Zoom meetings and start to meet people again. But we've all got varying degrees of a reality, something like that. Now, our reality is influenced by our belief system. So whether you believe that you can or you believe you can't, you're going to be right. It's the same old cheesy cliche about, do you see the glass half full or half empty? We've all heard it. We all kind of roll our eyes every time somebody says it, but it's true. We get to choose our perception or our take on the world based on our beliefs. Now, following on from, lockdown is hard work, I've made up these. They may or may not be relevant to all of you, but let's assume that deep down inside ourselves, over the last 10 or so weeks, we've formulated some beliefs like this. The future is uncertain, that's for sure. The future may be bleak and may be scary, depending on your optimism or your take on where it's all going and your trust in our politicians and our scientists. Worse may be to come. It's never going to end. These are all examples of beliefs that we formulate. They're not necessarily true, but they can be our beliefs. Now, our reality is formed by our beliefs, and we want to change the reality that says, I'm not coping very well. We want to turn it into, I'm coping perfectly well. I love Zoom meetings. Profits are going up. Stress is going down. Everything's hunky-dory. Most of you will have seen this film. For those of you who haven't, it's The King's Speech. It won an Oscar for Geoffrey Rush on the right, who is a voice coach, or he pretends that he's a voice coach. Colin Firth is King George. King George had a stammer, historically factual, and Geoffrey Rush taught him, explained to him how he could address the nation without stammering. And of course, the build-up of the film takes us to a nice ending where he delivers this speech. And for those of you who haven't seen it before, I'll spoil the outcome. Of course, he delivers the speech without stammering. Now, the point, why am I telling you this? The point is that if you've got a fear of public speaking and you watch that film, you're going to be very agitated. You're going to be anxious. You're going to be tense. You're not going to enjoy it as much as the person sitting next to you who loves public speaking, because they're going to be looking at that film thinking, this is bizarre. Why, what's the problem? Now, the purpose of that slide or that explanation is that two people can watch exactly that same film and have two different interpretations of, or two different physiological reactions from that film based on their experiences in the past and the meanings that they've attached to those experiences in the past. So if, like most of us, you make a fool of yourself the first time you appear in the school nativity play, or you forget a line, or a teacher says, shut up, Smale, sit down, you're going to store that memory in your unconscious for your future protection. Because the next time somebody asks you to stand up and talk, your unconscious is going to be telling you, be careful, remember what happened last time. And so over a period of time, you create this belief system that says, I can't do public speaking. So therefore, the example of watching that film with somebody who loves public speaking is that the two of you can have two different, very different physiological reactions. So interpretation of what we're seeing is absolutely everything. So you can look at the coronavirus pandemic now and go, wow, what an opportunity for our agency to make a lot of money or to help lots of individuals in this moment of crisis. Or you can look at it and go, business is never going to be the same again. I'm a busted flush. What am I going to do? That's a choice. Now, this will take a little bit of explanation. There are three key elements here. On the left, you can see it says conscious mind. On the right, it says unconscious mind. So those are left and right hemispheres, remember. In the middle, we've got subjective reality. Now, if we were to number these, conscious is number 1, unconscious is number 2, and reality is number 3. And this diagram is supposed to represent a cinema, and there are two little stick people sitting in that auditorium. The film is being projected, it's an external trigger, it's being projected from the left-hand side through that lens onto the screen at the front of the auditorium. That screen represents a filter of all of your memories and experiences, whether it's nativity play or whatever it might be. But when that film hits that screen, it then bounces back to your brain and your eyeballs, at which point you interpret what you're seeing. That's your reality. But two of you can interpret the same thing in two very different ways. So our reality is a complete construct. It is the sum of some of this and some of this. And we can say that 1 plus 2 equals 3. Or put in word form, and I know there's a lot of words there. Let's just do this slowly. Our reality is formulated by the logic and science. Remember, those are the bits of your left brain. And also partly by the meanings we've associated with our memories and our experiences, which is the right brain. And if our reality is 100% a construct and is our reality, then we can say that our reality, number 3, is the sum of left and right. I hope that makes sense. We therefore have a question, which is, if our left brain and our right brain adds up to 100%, how much gets formulated in our logical brain and how much of our interpretation comes from stuff that we've stored away in our unconscious? And that should be the first wow of the morning. 90% of everything we do every day is based on an automatic reaction, based on information we've stored in our hard drive. We reserve the conscious brain for when we really need to think about, what am I going to do right now? But most of the day, we're operating on autopilot. So if you think about rolling out of bed in the morning and your first steps going to the bathroom or going to the kitchen, you can probably trace half a dozen things where you do the same thing every day, absolutely identically. Not because you have to, but because it's just easy. So we use the unconscious to help us do things where we don't have to think, and the conscious helps us think about things where we're really faced with a problem we need to resolve. So we've got this sort of dilemma between left and right brains. It also creates for us a huge opportunity, because if you think about it, every training session you've ever been on, or every coach that's ever spoken to you, or any therapist that's ever spoken to you, they're all talking to you at a conscious level. But if you've formulated a reality that says the world is a scary place, you've done that primarily at an unconscious level. So it doesn't matter how hard you rationalize consciously, if the hard drive is full of that corrupted information, you're still going to have the same reality. So your underlying anxieties are going to be the same. I think I may have already said this. So our right brain is responsible for all of our feelings and emotions and creativity and instincts. So we do things instinctively. But the most important bit there, right at the bottom in bold, is that our unconscious takes care of all of our automatic responses to daily routine things. If I say boo, most of you will jump, not because the word boo has any great meaning, but you've associated it with danger. That's kind of the base principle. Now, our reality, our interpretation, is therefore regulated largely by what goes on in our unconscious. But you've spent a lifetime of storing information and putting it in that hard drive to keep you safe. So how is it that we're going to be able to influence and change it? So let's have a little bit of science on a Thursday morning. Our behaviour or our performance, which is my bag, is always the end product. So our behaviour is the end of a sequence, which starts with referencing some beliefs, which then goes to thoughts about what we do next, which then, like in that film, creates this sort of physiological response, whether it's adrenaline or endorphins or whatever it will be. Those are things that happen automatically. And that little sequence is all happens on autopilot. 90% of that is all done without you even thinking. And this is the base theory of cognitive behavioral therapy, which as a theory is brilliant. It's flawed in its delivery because it still relies on you to be thinking about it using the 10% brain when the 90% is still hanging on to the old behavior. But in theory, this is a really good bit of science. So put in a slightly different way, our behavior, the bottom bit, number 5, is based on how we feel. If we feel good, we behave and perform better. But our feelings are based on our conscious thoughts. So if we think negatively, we're going to feel uncomfortable, we're going to underperform. If we think positively, we're going to feel better, probably going to perform better. All of those come from the beliefs that we've stored over a lifetime in our hard drive. They're also triggered by everyday routine things. That's sort of in diagrammatic form. We've got the triggers, which include things like people or places. I can think of plenty of examples of hearing a song on the radio and immediately I'm back 20, 30 years and all the people that I was with at that point, they're all very real. Or you can smell some food and it takes you to a time and a place. All of these things are called triggers. They then help us to reference what we need to reference for safety. So here we have, we go from trigger to box number 2, unconscious belief. Now, we already said in this particular example about lockdown or building resilience, we've already said that we've got these beliefs buried away, whether for good or bad reason. The future's bleak and worse is to come and I'm not in control. So if you then reference one of those beliefs in one of your trigger moments, it's likely to take you to box number 3, where you're think about how do I mitigate against, picking to be the best we can be. So at that particular moment, we give energy to every single possible thing that might or might not happen. So even though it's likely that none of them will happen, we've gone into, oh my gosh, I'm going to get made redundant. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to pay the mortgage. Oh my gosh, I'm too old to get another job. Oh my gosh. Before you know it, you've completely catastrophized on every single worst case scenario. Just like in the cinema example, your physiological change now means that you're feeling anxious, you're tense, you're fearful. So, Stephen said, if you're a tennis player or a golf player, your best shots are not going to be made when you're full of adrenaline, when you're full of tension, when you're full of anxiety. Paradoxically, your best performances come when you're very calm and relaxed. But in this particular example, feeling catastrophizing about a negative outcome is going to make you feel pretty tense and anxious, at which point your performance in whatever aspect it might be is going to be short of your full potential. Now, it could well be that your performance is still right up there, but for most of the perfectionists amongst us, unless you're doing 100%, that's never good enough. So we all then beat ourselves up and we all wonder why we didn't achieve what we set out to achieve. And we go back to our unconscious beliefs where we reinforce them. So we create a loop. And what you just saw there was a habit loop. And the performance was just the end bit of it. just the symptom. Now, if the symptom, being stressed or not performing very well or not winning a piece of business that you should have won, is the thing that you're trying to resolve, then, you can't put a sticky plaster on the symptom. You have to seek out the root cause. And the cause of our unwanted behavior is always going to be our belief. So we created those beliefs. We put them in our hard drive. We stored them there for self-protection. But we can reverse this loop. And for most people, that takes a little bit of explanation, but it's not a magical process. It just means that we have to do something at an unconscious level to reverse some of the negative beliefs, i.e. we challenge whether they're true or not. Because if they're not true, then why are we allowing them to have so much power over us? So we're going to talk about challenging those unconscious beliefs and changing our behavior. Now, as Stephen said, I worked in media for too many years. I loved it for the most part. And about 20 years ago, my son was diagnosed with cancer. It was a game changer. I thought that I could just carry on as normal, but very quickly it became apparent that I didn't take work so seriously anymore. Surprise, surprise. And so I couldn't give it the same amount of energy that I would give it before. And people would ask me to do things and I'd kind of go, why? Not really very good attitude in a corporate environment, but you can understand why. So I started to struggle, and I discovered this process by chance. I don't like the word hypnosis, but it kind of is what it is. I suspect in 10 years' time, way beyond my time, it will be as popular as mindfulness has become in the last 10 years, but there's still a little bit of suspicion about the word. But if I tell you how it worked, you've seen that, how it works, it might give you a little bit of some of the fascination that I took from my first meeting. So I went to a marketing society dinner one evening. It was a Formula One based event, and my company worked in sports marketing. So I had some contacts there, and I sat down next to a chap who stood up and shook my hand, and I said, "What do you do?" And he said, "I work for one of the Formula One teams." And I said, "And what do you do?" And he said, I make their drivers go faster." And I said, "Oh, come on, what do you really do?" And he said, "That's exactly what I do. I make their drivers go faster." And I said, "Like you would." I said, "Well, how? How do you do that? And what's it called? And how long have you been doing it?" And funnily enough, he didn't really want to tell me much. He wanted to show off a bit, and he was a big name dropper. But I kept asking him the same question. And eventually I said to him, "Are you a hypnotist?" Now he said, I use hypnosis as a technique. I use many different techniques. But I guess, yeah, I'm a hypnotist amongst many other things. I call myself a mind coach or a performance coach. And I said, "Well, how does hypnosis work? Does it work?" And he said, "Yes, it's the most fascinating thing." So I'm deeply cynical and skeptical, of course. And I said, "Well, how?" So he started telling me stories about all of his rich and famous clients. And at the end of the evening, he was very funny. He was very entertaining, fascinating. At the end of the evening, he said, "Look, I don't think you've believed everything I've told you." Correct. But here's my card. And if you're interested, come and have a chat. Now, he didn't know anything about my background. He didn't know I had a son who was very ill in hospital, or a parent who was dying, or a job that I didn't want to do anymore, and all the things that go with that sort of stress. And I took his card, and the next day I took it to work and I put it next to my phone, and I kind of dared myself to call him. And eventually I called him. Excuse me. I called him and I said, "I'd like to come and have a chat." And I fully expected him to say why. What do you want to chat about, or what do you want to change? But he didn't. He just said, "Okay, when do you want to come?" And I set a time and I went to his office, and I fully expected him to say, "So how can I help you? What's going on?" But he didn't. He just looked at me and he said, "Look, I can tell you how this works if you want, or I could show you." So why don't you sit in the comfortable chair over there, the typical couch, and close your eyes? If I had been brave enough, I would have said, because I'm scared, and that's why I don't want to do that. But it was also awkward. So I decided that the least worst option was to sit on his couch, close my eyes, and pretend to be asleep or hypnotized. And I did a pretty good act of being hypnotized. And of course, I was wide awake, listening to everything he said. And it became apparent, to me anyway, that this was a rather embarrassing situation. He was talking what I considered to be nonsense. It was all very cheesy, a bit sort of Buddhist, New Age, spiritual, what I would call hippie stuff. And I convinced myself that this wasn't going to work, but I'll just keep my eyes closed until it's finished. So then I heard him say, open your eyes, which I did. And I looked at him and I said, I'm really sorry, but it hasn't worked. And he said, it has worked. And I said, it hasn't worked. And he said, it has worked. And I said, it hasn't worked. And he said, it has worked. So we had a bit of a standoff. He said, why do you not think it's worked? And I said, well, because I didn't go to sleep and because I heard everything you said, and there's nothing that you've said that's going to make any difference to me. So he said, well, that's interesting. He said, given that you've heard everything that I've said, can you tell me what I said? I thought this was a trick question. And I looked at him and I went, no, I can't remember anything you've said. And he laughed and he said, do you know how long I've been talking to you for? And I said, yes, I think it was 2 or 3 minutes. And he said, no, it was 45 minutes. Now, the first off is I didn't believe him, but it was 45 minutes. And he pointed me to the door and he said, don't analyze what we've done. Don't try and remember anything I've said. Don't look for any magic, and I'll call you in a week. Goodbye. And he pushed me out the door. Not quite as bluntly as that, but I left and I felt angry, frustrated with myself. And I was convinced that this was something I would never be doing again. And it was a load of old nonsense. And my original instinct had been correct, that it wasn't going to make any difference. And so I went off to my horrible world and got on with my life. Until a week later when he called me. And his first question was this. He said, have you noticed any change in your life? And I did the metaphorical 2 fingers down the telephone to him and said, no, I haven't seen any change at all. And then he said, since we met, how calm have you been and how relaxed have you been and how confident have you been and how well have you performed and how well have you slept? And I thought these were fairly random questions, but I answered them honestly. And I said, very good, and very good, and very good, very good, very good. At which point I had a bit of a light bulb moment. And I realized that I'd concluded a pretty massive negotiation during the week, which was going nowhere for a long time. And I, to this day, don't know how I made it happen. I just did. But more interestingly, perhaps, or more importantly, I'd had a health problem which suddenly had gone away. Now, that could have been coincidence. But I said to this chap, I've had this really debilitating problem. And since I've seen you, I don't have it anymore. And he said, he laughed and he said, tell me what it is. And I told him it was my ear, and I'm now deaf in this ear, but I had particularly bad, dizzy, like extreme vertigo in certain trigger moments. You know, we'll come to that in a minute. And since I saw him, I hadn't had any of these moments at all. Sometimes I'd have to get off the tube to be sick, physically sick. And I hadn't had the slightest notion of this since I'd seen him. So I told him this, and he said, it sounds like your unconscious is trying to tell you something that you don't want to hear, which I thought was more of his hippie stuff. And I said, pardon? And he said, I think your unconscious is trying to tell you something you don't want to hear. You're burying your head in the sand. Now, I wanted to put the phone down because it felt like I'd just been found out at this point. But he said in a very nice phrase, sorry, turn my phone off. He said in a very nice way, what's going on? I wanted to put the phone down because I didn't now want to engage in, blokes are not very good at explaining some of this stuff. I didn't really want to go there with him. But I found myself saying, my son has cancer. My mum has cancer. I've got a job that I hate. I've got a boss who I dislike. I'm really angry about how I had to leave my last company. I'm stressed. I'm anxious. I'm scared. I'm depressed. I'm drinking too much. I can't sleep. X, Y, Z. My football team's been relegated. You know, it was almost like I went, bleh, there you go. And I fully expected him to say, oh, sorry, I can't help with any of that. But he said, well, why don't you come back? And I said, well, how is coming back going to change any of those things? And he said, oh, well, that's a good point. He said, I can't change those things, but I can change you. And I said, well, how can you change me? I am who I am. And he said, yes, but your reality dictates how you react to situations. And it's your choice that you choose to not sleep. And it's your choice that you choose to be depressed. And it's your choice that you get anxious. And you don't need to. I can teach you a way to stay in control and stay calm and stay focused and stay positive. And I said, how? And he told me in about 5 minutes, a little bit of the science I'm now going to share with you. And I said, when can I come back? And I went back and we had a very different session and a very different conversation. But it ended with him saying, now go and sit on my chair again and close your eyes. Only this time, let me do what I do best. Just relax. Don't fight against me. Just relax. And I'm going to help you change the way you see the world, which is exactly what he did. So in those 2 sessions, he completely changed my reality. And about a month or so afterwards, I went back to him and said, how did you do that? What is it that you actually did? I'm just so amazed. And maybe it's coincidence or maybe it's placebo, I don't know, but I'm a different person. And he said, well, it's easy. Anyone can learn it. And I said, great, I'd like to learn it. Not because I wanted to do this for a living, but because I was just deeply fascinated. And when I started practicing on friends and relatives, and they started demonstrating that they were changing things they didn't believe they could change, I realized that there was more to this than smoke and mirrors. So how does it actually work? By creating a better reality, clearly, by creating a different perspective or reinterpreting some things that you'd never questioned or challenged before. So if we were able, the empowering bit in yellow there is the key. If we can change your negative beliefs from I'm not in control or I'm not focused into I am in control and I am focused, and you reference those new beliefs in your key trigger moments, it is likely that your behavior or your performance at the end will be different. It's also likely that if you practice being more positive for 21 consecutive days, it becomes part of it. We recalibrate what goes in our hard drive. So we have the ability to recalibrate, but we spend so much time thinking consciously about what we should and shouldn't do, we don't allow the unconscious to change. But here is a process that allows for us to change some stuff at an unconscious level. Are we all right for time, Stephen? Yep. Okay, so again, some light science. How many thoughts can we process? Remember, we use our conscious brain to process. How many thoughts can we process simultaneously in any one moment? I'll answer this for you. The answer is 5. Very limited number of thoughts. The bandwidth will not change in our generation until we've evolved. But question number 2 is going to create for us a bit of a problem. How many impulses, and I'm going to describe a thought as an impulse, how many of those electrical currents, like trigger moments in our day, do we have? We're only able to process 5 things consciously, but how many thoughts do we have every day? The answer is a staggering 60,000. Now, you're probably asking yourselves, like I did, well, if we've got 60,000 thoughts, but we can only process 5 of them in any given moment, and we're only awake for maybe 16 hours of the day, it's not possible. We just don't have the time or the bandwidth to consciously respond to 60,000 impulses, and that is true. So we rely on our subconscious and the information that we programmed into our subconscious during childhood and early adulthood. Our subconscious regulates for us about 90% of all of our thoughts. So truly, we are creatures of habit. We are doing things all day, every day, not because they're necessarily correct, but because they're easy. And they've already passed the test that says, okay, I've learnt it here. I'm now going to store it over here so I don't have to think about it again. And you can think of any number of examples like learning to ride a bike or learning to swim or learning to drive a car, where at the beginning it's really hard, but the moment you've got it, you transfer it from conscious thought into your hard drive, you never think about it again. Question number 4 is kind of key. Why is it that we have a subconscious? Not that I created it or I have a direct link to our creator, but what is the fundamental, the primary reason for having a subconscious? It keeps us safe. It keeps us alive. So using that driving example, you probably struggled in the first couple of driving lessons until you got the hang of clutch and gear stick and indicator and steering wheel and looking in your mirror. But over a period of time, we become quite familiar with that. We can do it without thinking. But imagine that you're driving up the motorway at speed and somebody pulls in front of you and you don't have time to think about what to do. The unconscious is programmed to protect you. So it will automatically either stand on the brake or swerve to avoid danger. And that's one example of millions of things that you've put bits of data from your background into your hard drive to keep you safe. So now we have got 4 statements. These are all statements of scientific fact. Let's examine how we put those together and see how simple behaviors can be changed from one that we always do to one that would be more preferable. This could be any number of things. Did I turn off the hair straighteners, or did I turn off the iron, or did I close the windows? But I like this one. It's kind of easy to explain. I can't see any of you, and normally in these group sessions, I'll get a show of hands. Who's familiar with this experience? Most people are comfortable with this. The next question is, well, how often does it happen? And some people are like, well, every day. Some people are like, no, once in a blue moon. But most people are familiar at least with the experience. So the question is, why does it happen? What is the fundamental reason why, for no particular reason, on one day, we get to the end of the road and out of the blue, we're thinking about our hair straighteners or our front door? What is it that made that day different? The simple answer is, on that particular morning, as you were at the front door, you were already thinking of 5 things. You were busy. So your conscious brain is completely now full. But remember, your unconscious protects you. And your unconscious also knows that every day, if you're the last one to leave, you lock the door. So this bit of your brain directs your hand to go into your bag or your pocket to retrieve your keys, at which point you put them in the lock, turn the lock, and you put them back in your pocket or your bag, and off you go. And you're still thinking of 5 things, but slowly you get rid of them. That's usually the point at which your brain then goes back into standby mode. And it will then say to you, in no particular order, Stephen, did you have a shower this morning? Stephen, did you eat breakfast this morning? Stephen, did you feed the dog? And all the time you're going tick, 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 tick. And then it says, Stephen, did you lock the door this morning? But you can't tick it because you don't remember. So you've now got a problem. You're now like, oh, what did I do? Did I lock the door or did I not lock the door? So you have a conflict, and your interpretation of that impulse will dictate whether you go back or whether you carry on walking. But just for argument's sake, let's say that carry on walking is less inconvenient and it's the preferred choice. If your brain is saying you're in danger, better go back, you are going to turn around and go back. And even if you have a slight amount of doubt, the chances are you're going to go and check, because it's better to be safe than sorry. To put that in another way, there is only one way that you're ever going to be able to carry on walking in that moment, in that specific nanosecond when the brain says, did you lock the door? The moment you get that impulse, you have to respond to that impulse with an affirmative, or in this case, negative. I never left the door open. I've never left the door open in my life. You've killed that impulse. You're free to walk on. But even if you have left the door open at some point, rather than just responding to this that says, oh my gosh, I've left the door open, and you say, well, what's the balance of probability? You've suddenly got a more rational view of that impulse, which is one of only 60, which is one of 60,000 you're having in the day. So if you're able to go, not relevant, you're able to then carry on walking. But for most people, they'll get that voice in their head that says back door, front door, window, hair straighteners, and they'll go into that sequence that I explained to you earlier, where they start to get fearful or start to get nervous or hesitant or doubtful, and they'll turn around and they'll go back. And I usually ask those same people sitting in the room, and how many times have you actually left? When you got there, was it open or not? And they'll go, no, always locked it. Occasionally you get somebody that says they have left it undone, but they're usually people who live in the countryside and never going to get burgled. So the point of this is that every single impulse trigger moment we have in the day, there's a binary response. It's going to be affected by your choice. Quite a nice quote about habit and the formation of habit. The chains of habit are too light to be felt till they're too heavy to be broken. Interesting, but I disagree, because you can break any habit, whether it's crack cocaine or drinking a little bit too much or smoke, whatever it is, you can break it, but you have to do it at an unconscious level as well as a conscious. It's no good having a good intention to stop doing drugs. You've got to change the information in the unconscious if that's what you want to do. So back to the subject matter here today, and whether it's resilience building or coping better or having a different perspective on COVID, your behaviour is no different from the choice that you're making with did I or did I not lock the front door. You're going to choose between the path of least resistance, that's easy, and in this case that's stressful, or the more considered better reaction, which is, do you know what, I think we'll get through this. I think we'll be all right. And you have to identify when those moments occur. It might be a person, or it might be the path of least resistance, the one that you've always done, is always going to be suboptimal. If we changed every reaction we had to every impulse every day, then we would be better versions of.
We appear to be losing contact with Tim at the moment. I don't know whether it's the Wi-Fi his end. Let's see whether he comes back to us.
Ourselves. That's probably not total carry on anyway, because I think we're nearing the end. The choice you make in every moment of your day is going to be predicated on doing what you've always done or something that's better. And you know the analogy that if we did 1% of everything we do better, we'd end up with far better results. So I think I'm going to probably wrap this up, particularly if you've got some bad internet. The old habits were, I'm not in control, I can't do this, it's going to get worse. That results in stress. If the better beliefs are, I'm calm, they'll find a vaccine, the economy is going to survive, we'll be okay, then we sleep better, we are happier individuals, and our families are happier too. The new habit loop has to be more about being calmer, not panicking, more relaxed, not full of stress, tension, lots of belief. Our behaviour becomes better. If you would like to experience some of that, as Stephen said, we are going to make available a piece of audio for you, for your organisation. Please feel free to send it to your team members if it just helps them sleep a little bit better. Listening to it without any of this explanation is not going to be quite the same. So you do have to give it a little bit of a backstory, but it's perfectly safe. You can't get stuck. If you can't relax and you want to open your eyes and wake up, it's fine. Just press the stop button. But find a place where it's going to be about half an hour. Find a place where you can relax, turn off other gadgets, make sure you're not going to be interrupted, make sure you're warm, and press the play button, close your eyes. Just follow the words. I'm going to use some breathing, sort of yoga, meditation, guided visualization techniques to get you into the zone. The zone is the bit halfway between conscious and unconscious. Usually takes about 5-10 minutes to get you to there. Once you're there, you're going to be in the same place that I was when I thought I was perfectly wide awake. You're not asleep. You're just in a sort of light daydream state. But in that light daydream state, the unconscious is now absorbing suggestion, particularly suggestion that is going to make a difference. So we're kind of, through the use of stealth and cheesy, boring language, boring the conscious brain into daydream, then introducing some new information into your hard drive and then closing it down again. That is all that it's about. Forget all the mystique and the Paul McKenna stuff that you've seen where people appear to be doing things they don't want to do. I have no intention and no ability to make any of you do anything you don't want to do. But if you want to be better and you want to cope better and you want to feel more in control, just allow the unconscious to absorb the suggestion. Listen to the audio a number of times if you want. Fall asleep with it on. Oftentimes when I'm doing these sessions in organizations, either to a pitch team or to a, it's an HR thing and it's helping people present better, or it's a well-being, or it's a building confidence thing, I'll get people to self-score some behaviors at the beginning of the session. And a week later, I send them the same scoring chart. And what we find normally is an hour of this theory followed by half an hour of the practical affects their behavior, their performance by about 30%. Now, in the days when I used to procure training and development, if anybody said to me, here's my offering, would you like it? I can help your people perform 30% better on the basis of one session, I'd have bitten their arm off. Actually, I would have said, prove it first. But if they could prove it in the way that I can, I'd have then bitten their arm off. So it's an interesting, the first hurdle is that word hypnosis, the H word. Get beyond that and you've suddenly opened yourselves to a technique that for most people would have remained, somewhere over there, left field. I'm never going to touch that because it's a bit too alternative. But, strange times, open your eyes or close your eyes, open your eyes to something that may be of benefit. You never know. I'm sorry if some of you got a loss in internet connection. Virgin Media, sorry, they're rubbish. I shall be taking up with them after the call. I think that's pretty much the theory. We've got a little bit of time. You don't need that. We've got a little bit of time for some questions if you have them, if you want to unmute or if Stephen wants to add any comment in there.
Yeah, a couple of questions to come through, if I may. And first of all, thank you very much indeed, Tim. That was excellent. I mean, I really, really did enjoy that. One of the questions is, if you're not open to the possibility of working with your methodology, will it work? I mean, if you come in, sit down, and actually you kind of have a negative belief system and you're unable to basically open yourself up to the possibility of change, does it make it impossible?
There's 2 or 3 things there that they're all very valid, and it's kind of why I told my story. I didn't believe that hypnosis could work. I believed that it was a threat. I believed that I was handing over control of my mind. I didn't want to do that. So I sat in that guy's chair and I resisted him. Now, what was interesting was it still worked. It still worked because what he'd said to me once he'd gone through his process of cheesy, guided meditation, he got to suggesting to me the benefit of being calmer and what calmness was and how that would impact on how relaxed I was and how those 2 things would make me more confident. So he introduced the concept. And if you remember a week later, he said, well, how calm have you been? And how I don't remember him talking about those things, but he did. My unconscious absorbed them because they were very positive things that clearly anyone would benefit from being calmer and more relaxed and more confident. But at that time, I was still resistant to change. But that was the first session. If I had, it's why I talk to new clients all the time about that experience, because if by the time they then have their experience, they kind of know, well, okay, well, I know I can stop. And I know he's not a threat, and I know he's going to try and help me. All I have to do is relax. Then the next part of your question is, can everybody be hypnotized? Well, yes, some people are very receptive to suggestion. Others are naturally more cynical about suggestion. And the best example of that is children. Kids are fantastic hypnotees. They love the power of suggestion because they're unencumbered with formulating negative beliefs. So you tell them that the future's going to be better or that they're going to score a goal on Saturday, and they generally do. It's the bizarrest thing. So they're like sponges. But I work on the basis that I think the statistic is 10% of people are uber receptive to suggestion. I work on the basis that I see the other 90%, people who've got a problem they don't know how to fix. And I take it as read that they're not just going to sit in the chair and I click my fingers and they go into an altered state. What I do is I take it very slowly and I bore them and I distract them and I confuse them and I bore them and I confuse them. And I literally bore them into that daydream state, at which point I give them some very gentle instruction. But once they've experienced change, and that's where the measurement thing comes in rather nicely, once they can see the before and after, even if they think it's coincidence, they're then hooked. It's like, well, if I can go from there to there, who says I can't go from there to there? And it's normally 2 or 3 sessions to change habits of a lifetime, regardless of what they are. Whereas, conventional therapy and coaching is like, see you every week for the next 6 months. And I don't, that's not to say it's not valid. It's just working at a conscious level, whereas I'm trying to get to the bit where the cause is, the negative belief about why you've got that problem in the first place.
Sort of build on that, thank you. It's a few things that people are coming in for. And Jane was saying earlier on, Jane Howarth, that she learned Shakespeare quotes for her A-levels by playing a recording of them to sleep. Remember myself too, going to bed at night for O-levels and stuff like that.
Very good.
Set player and trying to hit that unconscious brain. Equally too, I guess NLP is another form of
NLP is I call it pseudoscience. It tries to legitimize hypnotic practice by creating it's more scientific. It's no more scientific than what I just described.
But I guess it avoids the H word, doesn't it? So
yeah.
it's useful in that sense. Annabelle talks about the fact that she had hypnosis for some negative self-belief systems in her 40s, and it's been transformative. George, who is a coach himself, has said, is it possible, do you have any resources you would recommend that we learn, or other ways in which we can learn up about hypnosis in an experiential way? Is there, well, I think first thing, George, is listen to the 30-minute.
Yeah, listen to the audio first.
Yeah, and George, listen to that first, and actually
send me an email.
I'll connect you both and you can have a chat.
Yeah, send me an email.
And finally, for today's session, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Annabelle said, "Can you hypnotise Trump, please?" You do,
I think he's already been hypnotised negatively.
Yeah.
He needs to be de-hypnotised, not hypnotised.
Okay. Well, thank you. We're bang on the hour. That was really, really informative, really enjoyable. And I feel like I want to do it again now. So it's always a good sign.
Go and enjoy it.
Enjoy the rest of your week, everybody. And I've got a list of all the attendees here, so I'll get that link over to you later on today. And look forward to seeing you all on our next calls. Thank you very much.
See you.
Bye-bye.